And now we're going to take a look at some of the landmark homes in Red Wing. The Octagon House is a very unusual building. And here we have a picture of the James Lowther home built in 1856. This unusual and impressive brick octagon structure was constructed to mimic nature's most ideal form, the sphere. The stairway was originally placed in the center of the home for better airflow and designed this way for health reasons. This home was built by the bachelor Lowther at the age of 26. At the time of his death, he owned 19 businesses, 20 homes, and 90 farms. You noticed that it had a cupola on top, and with the Mississippi River nearby, it was great for seeing the ships going up and down the river. A pre-Civil War Victorian octagon home with 5 guest rooms, all with private baths. This is one of the oldest houses in Red Wing. The C.J. Ford Smith House was constructed in 1857 at 617 3rd Street. This Greek Revival-style home features a front-facing gable with wide cornice boards and returns, along with an offset front entrance. The Dr. Charles N. Hewitt Laboratory was built in 1857 at 216 Dakota Street. Dr. Hewitt was a surgeon in the Civil War and was responsible for the creation of the Minnesota Board of Health. It was here that he established his first laboratory for producing smallpox vaccine in Minnesota. The Christopher C. Graham House was built in 1858. This home combines elements of the Greek Revival and Gothic Revival styles. The Mrs. N. S. Messick home was built in 1858 at 621 4th Street. This Greek Revival-style home retains its broad cornice boards and cornice returns. We're standing in front of the Green Wilder home, constructed in 1857. It's a good example of the Greek Revival style of architecture. Here we have an example of the Gothic Revival style of architecture. This home is known as the Brand Warner home, built between the years of 1858 and 1860. Notice the steep roofs, the icicle style of brackets along the roof line. This is what is known as the Peter Daniels home, constructed in 1866, and it is of the early Italianic style of home. The Boettcher Ames home was constructed in 1867 at 905 3rd Street. This home combines the Greek Revival and Italianate style of architecture. Charles Boettcher established one of Red Wing's earliest and longest-lived lumber and millwork businesses. We are now standing in front of the Sprague Home, which is located on what we have been told is the most significant architectural corner in the state of Minnesota. Philander Sprague was an industrialist who in 1868 built this home. His business was in making terracotta ornaments for homes. You'll notice some of his work on the windows, those ornate caps over the windows were from his factory. With the Sprague home, we also get a very fine 3-story carriage house. We can see 2 stories here, and there's also a basement that leads out to the alley in behind. Across the street from the Philander Sprague house is the Foote home. This home was built in 1916 and is the bungalow style of architecture. The Henry P. Mcintyre House was built from 1868 to 1870 at 919 4th Street. This home also combines the Greek Revival and Italianate architectural styles. Mcintyre was a partner of T.B. Shelton and later helped found the First National Bank of Red Wing. The A.B. Hawley House was constructed in 1874 at 1105 4th Street. This home also combines Greek Revival and Italianate architectural style. This home is now Red Wing's largest bed and breakfast, called the Moon Dance Inn, featuring large common areas for weddings and business meetings. Here we have one of the more interesting homes in Red Wing. It's the T.B. Sheldon Mansion. This home was built in 1875. When it was originally built, it had 3 stories. The 3rd story was covered with a mansard roof. And for some reason or other, the story goes that this roof had a tendency to leak. So in 1958, they decided to take off the roof and even took off the 3rd story. The house didn't lose too much as far as space goes because that was a dance hall or a party room that the Sheldons used in the latter part of the 1800s to have their parties. The F.W. Hoyt House was built in 1875 at 803 5th Street. Constructed in the Italianate style for banker E.W. Hoyt, this house was later occupied by Lucius F. Hubbard, a pioneer Red Wing newspaperman and Civil War military hero who served as the governor of Minnesota from 1881 to 1887. Next to the Hoyt House is the Augustine House, built in 1906 of the classical revival style. The Pratt Tabor House was built in 1876 at 706 4th Street. Constructed in the Italianate style, this house displays a low-pitched roof with bracketed eaves, segmental arched windows, and a wraparound porch. Albert Pratt was a prominent local banker. In 1877, Mr. Horace Rich constructed this home, which is now called the Candlelight Inn, which is a bed and breakfast. Originally Italianate in style, the classic revival porch was added in the early 20th century. Step back in time at this B&B, which features original woodwork and authentic Queasel light fixtures. The Horace S. Rich Home was built in 1880 at 722 5th Street. This home combines the asymmetrical massing and varied sizing materials associated with the Queen Anne style. This home is now the Red Wing Blackbird Bed and Breakfast, which features a Scandinavian flavor of interior design. The Jamesy Teal House was built in 1889 at 709 4th Street. Note the home's multi-gabled roof and shingle styles. The John Rich's home, built in 1900. Notice the 2-story round porch that dominates the front facade. Notable details include the Ionic columns, front entrance with the leaded glass sidelights, and the corner pilasters with phrase boards along the top. I've been in this home, and it has a beautiful hallway leading from the front door back with rooms on either side similar to the homes built down in the South by the plantation owners. Some people call it the Georgian style of home. Right next door to the John Rich's home is the Charles Boettcher home, built in 1908. It is of the Tudor style, cottage style home. We have here a superb example of the Prairie School of Architecture. This home was built in 1913 by Mr. E.S. Hewitt. Homes being built of this style were very popular. That period of time was from 1900 to the First World War. You'll notice by looking at the windows that this style of home has leaded windows around the sides with an overhang, giving it the flat appearance from a distance. The F.B. Mcneil House was built in 1920 at 320 Pine Street. This is a frame bungalow constructed for the superintendent of the local sewer pipe factory. Arnson Casa Home, typical of many of the homes built in the 1880s. This home was built in 1883. A fine example of the Tudor cottage style of home is the Blondell House, built in 1935. This home was constructed in limestone by a local contractor named Johannes Johnson for his daughter. Its asymmetrical profile and steeply pitched roof, along with the irregular character of the stone facing on the walls, adds to the picturesque quality of the house. This home was built in 1867 and is known by the Brooks Sheldon name. The arched windows and bracketed trim around the roof are typical of the Italianic style of home. This is one of Red Wing's finest examples of Greek Revival architecture, constructed by C.V. Booth in 1857. This is the George Herman Boxrood home, built in 1925, and is a fine example of the Cape Cod style of a home. The trim of this home is a good example of the Gothic Revival style of architecture. This home was built approximately between 1865 and 1870. Even though this home is small, it's a very well-preserved frame cottage which retains its original Gothic Revival ornamentation. Distinctive details include the pointed arch window used in the center gable and the Italianic style influenced veranda, which is the porch, which wraps around the front and the side of the house. The J.E. Enns house, constructed in 1868, fine example of the early Italianic style of home. This is a fine example of the four-square style of architecture. Happens to be the Stephen E. Noble house, built in 1910. This is the C.A. Rasmussen Home, built in 1894. Fine example of a Queen Anne style of home. Go ahead. A polygonal open tower supported by rather muscular turned columns. It's capped with the sunburst panels and a witch's cap roof. The turn ball spindles used in the porch railings and the almost snowflake-like design of the porch's corner brackets are unusual. This home was built in 1935 by Raymond Johnson. It is a Tudor Revival or English cottage style of home. Notice the half timbers and the stucco between those half timbers. This is a great Jacob Sieg home, constructed in 1894. Although it lacks the tower, a common feature of the Red Wing Queen Anne style homes, this home is a well-preserved example of that style. Fishgale shingle ornaments and roof gables and a belt course between the first and second stories are fine examples of the Queen Anne style home. A bracketed cornice highlights the roof eaves. Decorative spindlework is used for the porch as well as to create a balconette railing for the attic windows. This is the J.R. Sweezy Home, built in 1928. It's a fine example of the Tudor Revival or the English cottage style of home. You'll notice the native stone first floor and the second floor of the half timbers with stucco. This home is now the Golden Lantern Bed and Breakfast, featuring original woodwork, whirlpool, hot tubs, and fireplaces. This home was built in 1865. It's right next to the Sheldon home and was owned by the Brown family. We have an example of the Prairie style home, made very popular by Frank Lloyd Wright. It was built in 1915 and originally for Charles Carl Boettcher. This home is an example of the classical revival style of architecture. It was influenced by the Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. This particular home was built in 1894. It was built originally by W.C. Chris family. This is a style of home called the Italianic, and it was called the Widow Town home when it was first built in 1875. You can tell partly about the Italianic style of home by the porch that wraps around the front and part of the side of the building. It is on the Register of Historic Places. This is a fine example of the classic revival type of architecture, built in 1896 by C.F. Frederic. This home is a Prairie school style home built in 1915, known as the Helen Frederic House. The Reason Spates home, a fine example of the Greek Orthodox construction, built in 1859. The Greek Revival style of home, you can notice here, is shown by the top roof lines that give somewhat the example of the Greek construction of the Pantheon. The Alfred Carlson home, a typical Queen Anne style, built in 1891. The front porch railing and spindle frays, which combined turned and wood pieces and the variety of moldings used to ornament each elevation in a slightly different way. Stained glass transoms are used above the front picture window and in the bay window on the south side of the house. Of special interest are the polygonal tower, complete with sunburst panels and copper roof finale.